Every e-commerce business owner knows that CRO and conversion rate optimization are crucial for growth in 2025. And most businesses start by hiring a CRO agency thinking that's the best path to getting results. But here's the truth. After working with over 50 e-com companies on their experimentation program, I can tell you one thing. A lot of CRO agencies are holding you back from achieving the results you actually want. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly why your CRO agency might be failing you, but more importantly, how you can turn it around and achieve the results you actually want. And I'm not saying this because I hate agencies. Look, I ran a CRO agency myself, and we've helped a lot of companies achieve great results with experimentation. But here's the thing. Experimentation being fully led by an agency is not right for every brand, for every company in every situation. And this is why we now help a lot of companies move away from a purely agency-led approach to one that is hybrid or even fully in-house. And we've seen great results so far. So if you're currently working with a CRO agency or looking to hire one, watch until the end of this video to see what massive mistakes you could make and how to avoid them. So the question you're probably having is in-housing your experimentation program right for you right now at this moment? So let's first talk about when is the right time to bring experimentation in-house. This is basically a way for us to understand, are we currently having a problem with our current agency, or is the company mature enough to already in-house a program? So making the transition from relying on a CRO agency to managing experimentation internally, and yes, in this case, I'm using these terms interchangeably, to managing experimentation internally can be a game changer. But make sure it is the right move right now. Basically what I just said. So one of the things that I see a lot of companies coming to me with is like they've hit a plateau with their agency. So they're oftentimes not really seeing the right kind of results they were expecting. They were overpromised some kind of results. And one of the pointers here is, like, if you're not seeing significant improvements, despite an ongoing engagement over months and sometimes even years, I have seen crazy things, then this might be the case that you're either not working with the right agency, or that maybe working with an agency at where you're at is not the right thing for you right now. Your agency keeps running standard tests without deeper strategic thinking. So one thing that I see happening a lot is just either agencies that are doing less experimentation, just like implementing best practices, which probably should be a totally different video, but big problem if they're promising you experimentation, but or A/B testing and a data-driven approach to everything, and just like running the same kind of tests they do with every other client, or just giving you a catalog of experiments to basically choose from. This is not strategic experimentation and will not move you towards your actual goals. Look at the other video I published on strategic experimentation and what mistakes to avoid there. Another point might be your company has already reached a certain level of maturity. This means you have a steady flow of traffic and enough conversions to run meaningful experiments. Well, this is obviously not a point just for in-housing the program alone. It is one of the cornerstones, right? If you already understand experimentation to a certain degree, you've built, like, as I said here, a strong data infrastructure, but you need better control over insights and execution and really want to own the process, which also is the next point, basically, then it might be the case where bringing experimentation in-house, or at least into a hybrid scenario, which I'm going to explain and cover in just a bit what it means, then that might be an option for you. Generally also, if you want more control over your experimentation strategy. If you see basically only the reports every month coming in or for every experiment, but you're like not really sure if this is fully aligned with overall business strategy, then it might make sense to bring experimentation in-house, or at least like do some kind of workshop together with your agency to make sure you're aligned, right? There is obviously multiple approaches for everything. Also, one thing I regularly see is you just need faster turnaround time, because a lot of agencies do have bottlenecks, which is not to blame them, but like it's just a thing that might happen. And if you maybe don't have all the resources of that agency, which likely you won't, then at some point maybe bringing either the full program or parts of it in-house might make sense, or finding a hybrid approach, which I will explain later. Then also, you're just basically spending so much on an agency, and I've seen crazy retainers happening, but with a limited ROI, or one that is not even easy to prove for you. So this might be your agency is just too expensive, but the work being done is, unfortunately, that's sometimes the reality, just done by junior level people within the agency, and you're receiving little to no strategic value, which you might expect from, an expensive retainer or project or whatever have you. So these are just some pointers. There's obviously more, and I'm happy to actually, if you have some a situation where you're not sure, are we already at a point to bring experimentation in-house, please just hit me up and we can talk about it. But generally, we might also just want to look at why do we want to bring experimentation in-house, because for a lot of companies just starting out with CRO, starting out with an agency or a consultancy, if you don't have anybody in-house, a lot of the times is the right move, especially as a first step. If you have no experience in CRO, then just winging it and bringing it in-house is like a mammoth project. But the point here is, if you do hit some of the requirements, why would you bring it in-house anyway, right? And don't get me wrong, there are quite a few also people that I know, amazing CRO and experimentation agencies out there. This is not to talk bad about generally agencies. It's just, for a lot of companies, working with an agency might not be the best move. And here is why you might want to bring experimentation in-house. I said already in the cornerstones checklist up here, having full control and ownership of your experimentation program is a big thing. One, and I've seen this when I was in interims role with companies, but I also saw this just as a consultant, but also the same thing is regularly just brought to me from within companies. Like, an agency will never have the same level of understanding of your business, your customers, and your brand. That said, they might have a different understanding, and that's not necessarily bad, but it won't be the same and full understanding that you might have, right? So you always your customer support is talking with customers, your product team, your ads team, all these people are working sometimes day and night with and on your company, with customers, etc. And the level of understanding that is being built over the years often just exceeds what an agency can do, especially in a limited engagement. And when we're talking control and ownership, it's also you decide to test what, when to test it, how to prioritize it, also in regards to what it is, like the business questions you want to answer. Maybe it's not just like the kind of things the agency wants to test, but you can prioritize things the way you want. Also, there's obviously guidelines you should follow, but generally speaking, it is your program and you can do what you want and what you feel is right. Then, as I already said, I think internal communication channels regularly where super relevant information is communicated over is just generally not available for agencies, especially if they're like just plugged into your comms channels, maybe on Slack or something. They will still miss a lot of what's happening outside of their comms scope. Then, greater strategic alignment. Internal teams can ensure that experimentation aligns with overall company growth strategies and not just by CRO vanity metrics. Look, obviously this is also pointing to some bad practices that I have unfortunately seen some agencies do, but still it's one of the things that really is super important to make sure, if you're working with an agency or not in-house, just generally making sure that you align your experimentation strategy even goals of single experiments with your overall company growth strategy, right? Super important, and unfortunately something that's often missed, and why the directions CRO programs take, especially if they're outside-led, regularly don't go in the direction that you want it to. Then there is also just more synergy between experimentation, marketing, product, and development teams, right? Goes again into the direction of full ownership and control. But in terms of strategic alignment, that's also something that's super important and helpful. Number 3, compound knowledge and expertise, right? This can be probably said not just about CRO or experimentation, but generally once you bring or let other people deal with it, especially in an end-to-end kind of way, you lose knowledge. You lose the work of building expertise in-house, which is an asset, right? People are assets, processes are assets, all these kind of things. And learnings and knowledge are assets. And if everything is just dealt with an agency just so you can get your uplifts, that's just something you lose. And in my opinion, having an internal program, or at least a person fully responsible for a CRO and experimentation program, can really help tie things together and make sure you're not losing learnings and knowledge from your experiments, but also learnings that happen within the process, because this is also a super important thing. It's not just about the outcome at the end, but it is about the process of experimenting. But yeah, we might get into that in another video. Then the last part here, I think this is before we go into alternative approaches, cost efficiency in the long run. And obviously, while initial setup requires investment in hiring and training and long-term savings, but long-term savings will outweigh typically, if you do it in an efficient way, and we have like a plan of how to do that, agency retainers, right? Because with agency retainers, oftentimes what's happening, and I've seen examples where that's not the case, but oftentimes what's happening is you're like basically like in a hospital on one of these drips, and you're just dripping basically. But once you remove that canal from your arm or whatever, you're like off, right? And then there's you paid, but there's little value internally. And if you build it up internally, or in a hybrid approach, you have all that in-house, and the cost didn't just vanish. Also, you can avoid paying premium prices for work that could be handled more effectively. And this also goes back to just having oftentimes, like I think where I was here, junior level team members working on things, but still like high retainers, etc. One of the things that I like to look at is a metric that's not so easy to calculate all the time, but it's a cost per experiment, and it's a bit of a hat tip to Microsoft and their or not just Microsoft, but it was published by Microsoft a few years back, I think led by Alexander Fabian, and for some reason here it doesn't really open, not sure why, but it's basically, and I'm gonna link it here, it's a research article from Microsoft. There was also people from Booking involved, and it's this experimentation flywheel, right? And one of the aspects here is lowering the human cost of A/B testing. And if you're if you're bringing experimentation in-house, you have a super high interest of automating as much as possible, and making sure processes run smoothly, because you just want to not do dummy work all the time. But this is a super important thing, especially if it's in your control, the program. You can have an easier time keeping costs under control and making sure you lower the cost per experiment, as it helps spin this A/B testing flywheel even faster. Probably should also do a video on this entire thing, because it's super interesting how it works and how big companies have used it to scale experimentation throughout their company. Now, I've talked about alternative approaches before, and I mentioned hybrid, fully in-house, or maybe end-to-end agency-led. And I understand, and obviously it's not the right approach for every company, but going fully in-house is a lot of the time not the right choice. But there are a few approaches that I like to look at. For example, number one here, the hybrid model, where you are trying to keep strategy in-house but outsource execution. This is one way of a hybrid approach, right? Where basically your team, and maybe sometimes that's in the beginning even just one or two people, own the experimentation strategy and insights while outsourcing test development and analytics. Especially if you do not have a lot of analytics and development capabilities in-house, that is a super easy, maybe not just easy, but a super scalable way to get going with experimentation, at least until a certain degree. And yeah, that's number one. Number two, internal team plus external consultants for guidance. So, and these are, most of them are actually also combinable. So, for example, if you don't really have external or internal developers, you might want to hire developers or through an outsourcing agency or through just a development partner or analysts, etc. But for example, you might have an internal team that consists of maybe a strategist and an analyst and a designer, and then you just want some external guidance for your program, where you basically work with CRO experimentation consultants to train your team, refine your approach, refine the process, and at the same time, you still reduce a dependency on an agency while still benefiting from expert insights. And this is actually also something that we regularly do with client, because it's just a way where we can come in, solve problems, and once these problems are solved, typically people or companies like to continue working with us, but we try to reduce the dependency. Whereas oftentimes, if there is like some kind of retainer or something attached to it, agencies do want to create this dependency, obviously, because this is where their money oftentimes comes from. And I think I mentioned it already in part one, but outsourcing development, keeping strategy and analysis in-house. As I said, many companies outsource test development to external teams while handling the rest of the process internally. It's cost effective, typically, or sometimes can even be outsourced to overseas because it's just cost effective, and you don't necessarily even need these people building the tests in the same country as you, so you can also make use of that. And as a side fact, a lot of agencies also now use this way of outsourcing themselves, because they realized, hey, the real value is generated typically in research and the actual execution of the process rather than the pure development of experiments. And also one way, and not every company is ready to fully in-house experimentation immediately. Obviously, this is not like you cut off your agency and then you go fully in-house like from one day to the next. But what I always would suggest is start by taking ownership of the strategy. What is so core to your business that you actually should be owning it anyway, and then and prioritization while an agency executes, right? And this is obviously working hand in hand, and then slowly build up the internal capabilities until you might no longer need external support, or just need more, maybe at that point then, strategic support, where they can help you execute better, or make sure the program is actually aligned, and there's just less overall dependency. So here are a few key factors that I like to consider before going in-house or helping companies move to an in-house program. There's 5 things, and maybe I come up with more, but these came to mind when doing this video. 1, try not to do everything at once. It is oftentimes a big process to build up an internal program, especially if you previously had just everything done by an agency. Then make sure you do have the right infrastructure, and not just when you decide to, now we're going to go in-house, but actually make sure you have it beforehand. And but that's also a good point where you might actually want to get external help, just to skip some of the work that has to be done, right? Then skipping proper training. This is what I sometimes see when companies had an agency do it, and maybe they had some junior people from the agency on their project, and then people are like, actually, I just could do this better. I'll just do some course and then we're done. And the person then internally executing the program has never received any proper training and doesn't have real experience in CRO experimentation, maybe doesn't even know statistics, etc. So here I would always advise get your team's proper training. It's not just to tick this box, but it's actually just a worthwhile investment for the program and for your progress and reaching your goals. Then also same with trying to do everything at once. It's just also rushing the process. Take your time. I've seen some programs built up within like 90 days. Some take a year, 2 years, depending on also what kind of environment you're working in. If you're e-com or you're just your e-commerce part is just part of a bigger organization, it might take longer versus like you're fully e-com D2C native and only existed for 5 years. Maybe it's easier to get people on the train for experimentation. And then one thing, and this might sound cheesy, but not having expert guidance. This entire process might be very overwhelming if you haven't done it before. So I always recommend having somebody who can guide you through that process, and or at least like give some advice at certain stages, so you have a plan for how to go from a hybrid or from a fully agency-led approach to an in-house program. Now, before making the transition, I would consider the following facts, and they align somewhat with these 5 key factors. Do you actually have the right talent in-house? If not, I would try to understand what roles you need to hire, what cross functions you could use from other people, maybe from other teams to do this. Is there any people who might be interested in working in this field or have previous experience, stuff like that? I would definitely look into. Then, as I said, do you have the right infrastructure? This means robust data setup, the testing tools, documentation tools and practices. All that should ideally be in place, at least to a certain degree. Things can always be optimized, so don't wait for the perfect setup, but at least the necessary infrastructure should be in place. Then one of the big things, unfortunately, regularly skipped is whether or not your company is committed to an experimentation culture. And while it's probably hard to say, oh, everybody's committed and they love experimentation, people should at least be open to the idea, and top-level leadership should be bought in, or if you're not at that point yet, help them or try to get buy-in from people in leadership. Then one thing, as I said here, skipping proper training, make sure you're actually investing in training and development of your teams, so they're not just stuck where they are, but they're actually being developed and also getting the support they need to do this sometimes mammoth project. So now you know exactly why your CRO agency might be holding you back from achieving the results you actually want, and what you need to build a successful in-house program. But here's the thing, transitioning from agency to in-house isn't something you want to figure out through trial and error. You need someone who's done this before, someone who can help you avoid all the costly mistakes and set up your program the right way from day one, ideally. That's exactly what we do at 3Tech. We help e-com businesses like yours transition from ineffective agency relationships to powerful in-house experimentation programs that actually drive growth. If you want to learn more about how we can help you make this transition successfully, click the first link in the video description down below and book your strategy call with me or someone on my team. And if you want to learn more about CRO fundamentals first, I have developed a comprehensive free CRO course that will give you the foundation you need. Click the video right here on the screen to watch it. And I'll see you in the next one.